which was why his conviction was important. On this fateful day in 2014, a prison inmate who apparently knew all about the inner workings of the gang took the stand against Angelou, and this didn't sit right with the suspected gangster. To add fire to the fuel, court officials decided that day to keep Angelou unrestrained in front of the jury, hoping and believing that he would not do anything stupid. Unluckily for him, he actually did. As the witness began narrating his testimony, Angelou stood up from his seat, armed himself with a pen, and ran towards the witness box. He launched himself at the witness, and within a split second, 4 shots were heard, and the man was downed. It was a federal U.S. Marshal who fired those final shots, hitting Angelou in the chest. The whole courtroom was thrown into shock and panic as officers tried to evacuate everyone from the scene. The witness was also taken away from the scene, and that pretty much wrapped up the case. But the story doesn't end there. Angelou's death sparked the age-long debate of how racial prejudice influences the American justice system. His family argued that the officers used excessive force in dealing with the situation, and that Angelou's attack could have been stopped without snuffing his life out. On the other side, there were people who didn't exactly subscribe to this theory. They believed that Angelou knew what the consequences of attacking someone in the courtroom would be, especially in such a case that required the presence of federal officers. So it seemed he reacted in a moment of anger after seeing the said witness, and paid dearly for his outburst. His family would later file a lawsuit claiming that his rights were violated, but that only achieved little, and the case was eventually thrown out. Nathaniel Richmond. Back in 2017, this Ohio judge found himself in a precarious situation after the father of a suspect showed up in court with murder on his mind. It was around 8 a.m. on Monday, August 21, 2017, when the events unfolded at the Jefferson County Courthouse in Steubenville. Judge Joseph J. Brzeze, Jr. was walking towards the building when he spotted a car waiting for him at a bank parking lot. As the judge approached, one of the men got out of the car and suddenly opened fire on the judge. That man was Nathaniel Richmond. But how exactly did Richmond and Judge Brzeze cross paths, and why did their encounter end in a tragedy? According to court records, Richmond was a plaintiff in a wrongful death lawsuit that the judge was overseeing. This haunting lawsuit involved the death of Richmond's own mother in a house fire in Steubenville earlier in 2015. But that's not where it ends. Richmond was also the father of a former high school football player, Malik Richmond, who was convicted of assault in a highly publicized trial back in 2013. So a lot of people believe the man was embittered by his constant brushes with the justice system and decided to take out his frustration on the judge. Or maybe he was just seeking an easy way to get out of the case. Either way, his plan would eventually backfire, and the hunter became the hunted. Initially, Richmond held the upper hand, holding a gun to the judge and even shooting him in the stomach. But this judge was not willing to go down without a fight. In a strange twist no one saw coming, Brzeze got up and brought out his own gun, firing at the suspect as he fled to the getaway car. Another officer also noticed the exchange of fire and joined in, shooting at the attacker until he could no longer run. As the smoke cleared, the judge was airlifted to a hospital in Pittsburgh, and after undergoing surgery, he was able to make it out alive. The same cannot be said for Richmond, who died right in front of that courthouse. CCTV footage of the encounter was eventually released, and it showed that the attack was a basic ambush. The other suspect who drove the getaway car was also apprehended, and he faced a heavy penalty for his role in the whole incident. The shooting shocked the community, and it also highlighted the dangers that some judicial officials have to face when dealing with some of the most hardened criminals in America. Now it's time for our subscribers' pick. In the hallowed halls of the justice system, some cases are more peculiar than the others, like that of Mary Ann Bachmeyer, a woman stricken by the loss of her daughter at the hand of a hardened criminal. Without batting an eyelid, Mary Ann walked into that courtroom on that day with one intention and one intention only: to take the life of the man who took her daughter from her. She claimed she actually wanted to shoot him in the face, but instead, she chose to attack him from the back. And with those 7 shots, she eventually evened the score in a way the justice system could never have. However, Her vigilante story had also attracted criticism from some people who believed that Mary Ann should have trusted the justice system to deliver the appropriate punishment. They claimed that killing a killer only made her a killer as well. However, that sentiment is disputed by the larger percentage, who see her as a heroine and a figure of justice. Do you think Mary Ann made the right decision by taking the life of her daughter's killer? Or do you believe there is no justification for extrajudicial killings? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section down below. Now, let's get back to the video. Brian Nichols. This is Brian Nichols on the day of his trial, just before he brutally murdered 4 people in the courtroom thinking he could get away with it. The chilling event took place on March 11, 2005, while Nichols was on his way to answer for his assault charges. In addition to the assault, Nichols was also charged with kidnapping and the assault of yet another victim who was a former girlfriend. His trial was a roller coaster, and the first attempt ended with a mistrial. While awaiting the second trial, his family and friends expressed their concerns that he would try to run away, but no one took their claims seriously. Unfortunately, when he finally did, he took several other innocent lives along with him. The attack started with Sheriff Deputy Cynthia Hall, whom Nichols found while she was changing clothes at the Fulton County Courthouse. He managed to steal her Glock service pistol before subsequently beating her into a coma, but he wasn't done yet. After changing into civilian clothes intended to be used during the trials, Nichols formulated his escape plan, which involved a whole lot of chaos and a dash of bloodshed. First, he encountered case managers Susan Christie and Gina Clark Thomas, as well as attorney David Allman, holding them all at gunpoint and demanding they lead him to the chambers of Judge Barnes, who was presiding over his case. One man, Sergeant Grantley White, attempted to disarm the suspect but failed, and he joined the list of hostages. However, White had also triggered an alarm which Nichols tried to dispel using White's radio. After a little dramatic display, Nichols walked into the Judge Barnes's courtroom and opened fire, brutally taking Barnes's life, as well as shooting court reporter Julianne Brandow. While trying to escape from the courtroom, Nichols also fatally shot Sergeant Hoyt Teasley, bringing his total victim count to 4. He was able to escape from the scene by stealing cars and holding people at gunpoint to do his bidding, and for a while, he thought he had escaped. The manhunt for Nichols was one of the hottest America has ever seen, and it was even featured on America's Most Wanted, with a reward of $65,000 offered to anyone who could help in his arrest. With the entire security force searching for Nichols, he got scared and desperate, so he decided to kidnap a young woman named Ashley Smith to use as a pawn in his escape plan. On that same day, Nichols also encountered ICE Special Agent David G. Wilhelm and fatally shot him before stealing his badge, gun, and pickup truck. Unfortunately for him, though, the victim was able to contact the cops before she was abducted, and it didn't take long for the police to show up at her apartment in Duluth, Georgia. Nichols would eventually surrender to the officers after holding Smith hostage for 7 straight hours, marking an unremarkable to such an octane-filled situation. He was then taken to a FBI office in Decatur, Georgia, and then to a police station in Atlanta, where he confessed the details of his crimes on video. He was eventually indicted on May 5, 2005 on 54 counts, which included murder, felony murder, kidnapping, armed robbery, aggravated assault, theft, carjacking, and escape from authorities, to mention a few. Initially, he pleaded not guilty, with his lawyers citing insanity as probable grounds for his acquittal. But the Fulton County attorney did not buy the story. He sought capital punishment. After deliberating for just 12 hours, the jury found Nichols guilty of all the 54 counts leveled against him on November 7, 2008. Less than a month later, on December 13, 2008, he was slammed with multiple life sentences with no possibility of parole. Although the goal was to make the criminal face the death penalty, Georgia law made this quite impossible, so the prosecution had to settle with the life sentences. Nichols is currently incarcerated in Georgia Diagnostic and Classification State Prison, where he will likely spend the rest of his life. Michael Marin. On June 28, 2012, American financier, lawyer, and ex-Wall Street trader Michael Marin shocked the world when he took his own life during a court hearing. But how did a millionaire who had everything he needed find himself in this precarious situation? It's a story that takes us back to 2009, when Marin allegedly started a fire in his $1 million Arizona mansion. Apparently, he was facing some financial problems, and he couldn't afford the mortgage on his home, so he tried auctioning it off, but that didn't work. Out of desperation, he even climbed Mount Everest, thinking the publicity from that would help drive the sale of his home. But that also didn't work out. After all his options had failed, Marin became increasingly frustrated, and so one day, he decided to set the house on fire before escaping using a rope ladder and dressed in scuba suits. He was soon arrested and charged with arson, marking the start of a sensationalized trial that destroyed whatever hopes Marin had left. As the trial began in May 2012, Marin's attorney informed him that he could be facing up to 16 years in prison for the crime, and that seemed to have been the last straw for him. As the trial proceeded, he knew the odds were stacked against him, and on the final day of the trial, his worst fear was confirmed. He was declared guilty as charged, but just before his sentence was handed down, Nichols did something shocking. Video of the sentencing shows Nichols apparently putting something in his mouth, and minutes later, he mysteriously collapsed. He was immediately rushed to the hospital where he passed away, and during autopsies, medical personnel found toxic substances in his system, which meant that he probably took a poisonous substance in that courtroom. This suspicion would eventually be confirmed after officers searched his car and found a canister labeled cyanide. Apparently, Nichols purchased the deadly substance in the previous year, after he realized the case would not turn out in his favor. His son also received what appeared to be his final note, along with his will, which meant that the actions were premeditated. But prior to his death, Marin was a socialist who enjoyed the finest things of life, traveling, partying, and making more money than he knew what to do with. How he lost all that money and had to resort to desperate means of survival remains a mystery. And thanks to the dramatic courtroom display, his story continues to be told many years after his death. Thank you for watching this video. See you in the next one.